Hello, everyone. Welcome back. You are listening to the fastest growing podcast in all the land. This is the Tournament Podcast featuring the brothers, Mike, Tom, yours truly, Marty. And every week we have different topics ranging from music, movies, professional wrestling. It goes on and on. So check us out each and every week. We release a hot new take on every Sunday. But this week we're going back to our roots. We're going back to professional wrestling. And what we're going to do here is what I call the best of the rest. I have chosen 16 wrestlers that we have not covered on our previous two wrestling podcasts. So, to reiterate, we did a podcast, the 16 best wrestlers of all time. None of those names will be in the list today. And we also did the 16 best wrestlers to never hold a world title. None of those wrestlers will be in this list either. So, it was hard to come up with a list of the remaining wrestlers that I thought were good enough and were not included in that list. Um, as always, we kind of have some criteria that we go with. The most important, in my opinion, is the in-ring ability, the career impact, the mic skills, and their look. Also, keep in mind when we're going through each matchup, if two of us side with one wrestler, there is still the veto that Tom, Mike, or myself can use to veto and move a wrestler through. So there's always that element of surprise that can happen. Without further ado, guys, unless you have anything, I'll go ahead and list the wrestlers this week.
No, I've got nothing. I'm excited to go back to our roots and delve
Nice.
into professional wrestling.
Now, this again is my list that I picked, the best of the rest that we've not covered. In no particular order, we have Booker T, John Cena, Kurt Angle, Kurt Hennig, Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Daniel Bryan, The Great Muta, Rey Mysterio, Vader, AJ Styles, Brock Lesnar, Goldberg, Mick Foley, Jushin Liger, and RVD.
Wow, that is a one hell of a list.
Yeah,
Nice.
That's a Hall of Fame list if I've ever heard it of guys that I can't believe we have not had on any one of our prior wrestling podcasts.
absolutely, and that's what made it fun, but a little challenging too. Because I mean, immediately, I was leaning towards people like Arn Anderson, Jake Roberts, but we'd already covered them in the best to not win the world title. So
Yeah.
yeah, but again, we'll use that same criteria: ring work, their career impact, life skills, and look.
Nice.
All right. I already have the names input into our proprietary tournament generator. I'm going to go ahead and hit generate.
This is where it gets tough. Right out
Okay.
of the gate.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm a nervous wreck. The first matchup we have here is Booker T versus RVD.
Oh man.
Uh, which one of you guys wants to take this one?
Whew. I guess I'll go
Nice.
first.
Nice.
Wow. Yeah, yeah, already out of the gate. This is.
I might have
This
to
is
stop recording.
Yeah, this is a difficult one. I mean, obviously, both men are fantastic in-ring workers, both multi-time champions. Oh, goodness. I'm just gonna, let's see. I mean, in-ring ability, said both guys were good, but I'm gonna give the edge to Booker. Mike skills, I think you gotta go Booker again. I don't know if RVD was ever the most polished on the mic. Let's see, what other criteria did we throw out there? I'm all flustered.
The career impact that they
Oh
had,
yeah,
like their legacy, basically, and then the look.
yeah. Look, whew. Yeah, look is I'm gonna kind of cancel each other. I mean, it's hard to really say one guy had a better look than the other. So career impact, I think I'm gonna go again with Booker T. I mean, both guys, had great careers. Where, I think RVD might still wrestle from time to time and Impact. Booker T, obviously doesn't, but he's still on, TV and does analysis and stuff. So both guys are still around. So I guess overall, I gave Booker the ability, Booker the mic, and Booker the legacy. So it sounds like I'm going with Booker T on this one.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean,
Nice.
can't go wrong at all.
Yeah,
Oof.
either way, it's hard.
Yeah, I mean, for me, in ring, I mean, they were both really, really good and with vastly different styles. Although Booker did have a little bit of razzle dazzle to his game, but obviously Van Dam was more of a high flyer, risk taking type style. I mean, just for like live fans and stuff, I would think excitement wise, probably I'd go slightly to RVD. On the mic, I just simply remember the one time that Booker T called Hulk Hogan something he shouldn't. So I'm just going to give the mic to Booker T. The look, I mean, again, very similar. I mean, I guess if you're just going strictly by size and that, you go with Booker T. But I mean, Van Dam was, I mean, obviously in phenomenal shape. Career, I mean, Booker. I mean, the titles galore between these two guys. I know they were both, or I believe, again, I reiterate this with every wrestling podcast that we have. I know very little about WWE. I think they were both WWE World Champion. I know then Booker was a tag team champion in WCW. Booker was also the World Heavyweight Champion in WCW. Rob, coming from ECW, I know he was like the equivalent of, I think they're like U.S. champ or TV champ or something there. I don't know if he was ever their world champ. He may have been. Again, we do these podcasts completely. There's no research done. We're going just completely by the knowledge in our head. But anyway, because I don't want to drag this out too long here, I would think all in all, in terms of a package, I mean, a legacy, I'd give the slight edge to Booker T myself.
Nice.
Nice. So,
Sucker!
right,
Just had to throw that in.
right now, Booker T is advancing unless I would dare use veto, but I will agree with you. Going by the criteria of the in-ring work, I think they were both, great workers. I do think Booker T was smoother. Rob Van Dam had a tendency to, injure some guys back in the day because he was so over the top with his style, the kicks, and he used chairs a lot, where that Van Daminator, those kind of things. But I give Booker T the edge because he was just so smooth and so good. Mic work, I'm gonna also give it to Booker T. I don't think Booker T was, fantastic on the mic, but I don't think Rob Van Dam was anything, spectacular on the mic at all. Um, as far as her career impact, I think Rob Van Dam, in my opinion, is known more for ECW, and Booker T is, maybe known as kind of like the young guy that finally was able to get a real wrestler in WCW, or for the world title, I should say. Finally, someone who deserved to have it. That was a great worker. But all in all, I agree. I'm going with Booker T. So we have Booker T advancing, and he will be going up against the winner of the Great Muta
Nice.
and Rey Mysterio. So, Tom, if you want, you can go first on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to be saying this a lot, which is, oh my God, is this one a difficult choice? In ring, well, and let me be honest and be transparent here. I have a tremendous fondness for the Great Muta. Probably one of my favorites of all time. Well, probably one of my favorites of all time. Loved the Great Muta. In ring, I mean, because Muta had that Japanese style, but then added so much flair to it. He was like a tweener, so to speak, where Ray was absolutely a luchador. But Ray was, man, just on another level with his ability. Golly, man. In ring, I guess, and I'm just, we try to be as honest and just go with, the facts. I'd probably go with Ray. Mike, well, I don't know if Great Muta ever uttered a word, so I guess that's Ray. The look, I know, I like the masked wrestlers, but I'm going with Muta on the look. Body-wise, I mean, they were both in fantastic shape. I like the painted face and just the way Muta carried himself. Legacy, there's where you get into a tough call because, I mean, Rey Mysterio would be considered. And let me just throw this in a quick little caveat here. I can't stand that WWE Hall of Fame. I mean, if they called it the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, it might even be a little bit different. But they call it the WWE Hall of Fame, just to give themselves some more rub.
Yeah.
And I don't know, and I'm not a fan of Vince at all. I think he destroyed professional wrestling. Vince is a worker. Phenomenal. I've said this before to people, probably the greatest just overall performer or character I've ever seen in my life was the evil Mr. McMahon. Phenomenal. And I say phenomenal about 20 times an episode, by the way. I was going to make that into a drinking game. But other than that, just not a fan of WWE or Vince McMahon. So what I'm getting at is Ray, I'm sure, maybe he already is, a surefire Hall of Famer, where Muta will not be. And I don't know if you had to have wrestled in the WWE to get into their Hall of Fame.
Huh. I don't believe so. I believe there are several guys that are in there that never stepped foot in a WWF or WWE ring.
Oh, okay.
Definitely, yeah.
So legacy, though, and why I said this is tough, because then you're going overseas. And Great Muta, I mean, the accomplishments, the titles, I mean, just an enormous star and an enormous presence in Japan and overseas in general. And I guess just to cut to the quick here, I'm going to just go ahead and be completely biased here just because I have such a fondness for him. I don't really care who he was up against in round one. And he may not advance, but I'm going Great Muta. I just love Great Muta. The style, the things that he brought to the game that we never saw. You know, Muta. That's it. Great Muta.
Nice.
Next.
I'll go ahead and jump in here and go second, I guess. Let's see. For the in ring, I'm actually gonna go, I think, with Muda in this case. Both guys, phenomenal workers, but Ray is primarily kind of a high flyer, where I think Muda can kind of do both. Muda can do the moonsaults and the flips and stuff, but he can also do power moves because of his size. So I'm going to go with Muda, I think, overall for the in ring work. Yeah, Mike, I guess just by default, you're going to have to go with Ray. Body, yeah, both guys, at least at a point in time, are in phenomenal shape. Whew. But just because, and this might be a little odd, but just because Muda had just a tinge of chest hair, I'm going to go with Muda.
Nice.
For the body.
See, now we're getting
And,
really detailed. Like
absolutely. It. And then, yeah, Legacy, like I said, is kind of hard because, here, Rey Mysterio is damn near a household name, at least amongst wrestling fans, where overseas, Muda is a legend. Well, actually, Muda, to some people is a legend here, but I'm sure more people know Ray. Where, yeah, overseas, it's probably going to be more Muda, I would think. So that one's kind of hard. So yeah, I'm going to kind of go with my heart a little bit too. I did give the in ring and the body both to Muda. Mike went to Ray. Legacy, it's kind of hard to say. So I'm just going to go with, my heart as well. And I'm going to go with Muda too.
Nice.
So,
Well,
if Marty uses a veto.
No, he'll go with Muda. He'll go with Muda.
Well,
Well,
guys,
we both have a veto too, so.
Yep.
I'm not allowed to change it, it sounds like. So we'll go to the next. I'm guessing. So for the second bracket, we have a clean sweep, and then it comes to me. It's this is a cool matchup, like you guys both said, that each of these guys are internationally known stars. Obviously, Muda in Japan, and Ray started out in what are those? AAA, the Mexican wrestling organizations, and was a superstar there. They both hit the mainstream in different eras. Muda coming to NWA and Rey Mysterio WCW. Fantastic workers, both of them. But you know what? For the total package of the wrestler, I agree with you guys again. Muda had an incredible look. His style was so unique, especially at the time. The way he moved, the quickness, the snap of his elbow drops, the handspring, back elbows. He was just so good. I remember going to a house show in probably '89, and I had a Great Muta pin I bought, which I've been looking for several years. I don't know where it's at, but I do have a Great Muta pin. Long story short, I agree with you guys. I'm going to go with the Great Muta. So
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I still think that's one of the biggest blunders that WCW made, that they just did not do more with him. I think he had it all. He would have been he was kind of a tweener, obviously, with Gary Hart, and that I know he leaned more heel, but I mean, he would have been a perfect heel world champion. They just dropped the ball big time on him. Now, they didn't overseas. they utilized him correctly, but yeah, big mistake by WCW and really WWE. I don't know if they tried to get him. I'm sure they did at some point, but anyway.
Muda
Well,
was a beast.
just to piggyback on what you just said, and I think Mike knows this too from listening to some of the podcasts, and Tom, you might know this, but there was actually a lot of discussion with the booking committee. I think back when, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when Sting got injured and they switched their plans and turned Luger babyface to wrestle Ric Flair, there was a lot of talk back then they were going to switch the Great Muta babyface because he was so popular anyway, and have him get a run as a babyface and I think world champion. But it sounds like Gary Hart really balked on that because he knew as a babyface, Muta wouldn't have him as a manager, probably, and Gary Hart kind of talked him out of it. But that's an interesting what if Great Muta would have been a babyface and the world champion, for God's sake.
And why these organizations, and again, Eric Bischoff was kind of the first one, I think, that tossed this idea out the window that it has to be babyface versus heel. I don't know why it took until him to have baby against baby, heel against heel. I mean, it just makes, so if you would have had a heel Rick against a heel Muta, I mean, my God.
Oh,
who cares? I mean, it
tremendous
match.
Yep.
So anyway, I don't want to hold us
up. I agree 100%. So in the second round, we're going to have Booker T versus Great Muta. Dream matches galore here.
Yep.
But on to our next bracket here, we have Curt Hennig going against Bill Goldberg.
Oh, Jesus.
And I guess I'll jump in and take this one first. Right out of the gate, in-ring work, I don't think there's any surprise. We're going to go with Curt Hennig. When we talk about mic skills, I think there's also no surprise we have to go with Curt Hennig. Goldberg certainly wasn't, polished on the mic. When you talk about career legacy, for, a quote-unquote smart wrestling fan or someone who really studied it for the art that pro wrestling is, in my opinion, I think you obviously would say Curt Hennig, but man, for those 2-3 years that Goldberg was, undefeated, at least for 2 years when he was quote unquote undefeated in WCW, he was transcending wrestling where he was getting on close to the level of Stone Cold. He was on the cover of Reader's Digest, TV Guide.
It might have been.
Yeah, he was getting humongous. WCW was getting all types of mainstream publicity. So that one is a little bit tougher for me. As far as the look, I think you have to go with Goldberg. Just the body alone, he was humongous. He was menacing. He was in all black. So, pretty much looks like I had, 2 for Curt Hennig and 1 for Goldberg. Man, it is a tough one, but trying to be, again, very, objective with this. I just think, man, Curt Hennig was just one of the greatest of all time, no question. Definitely, if he's not a top 10, he's a top 20 greatest of all time. I'm going to go with Curt Hennig. I have to.
What?
Yep.
Nice.
And then, Mike, yeah. I think you would be next on this one, I believe.
That's fun. Yeah, this one so far, at least for me, I think will be the easiest one. Yeah, like I said, in ring, you got to go with Curt. Mike skills, you got to go Curt. body, and all due respect to Kurt, because I think Kurt was in pretty good shape, but it was hard to tell with the I don't even know what you call, not
Like
a
this
singlet, but with the double
bicycle.
strap
Yeah.
thing. So you couldn't really tell, but obviously Goldberg was in phenomenal shape and still is for a man that's in his early to mid 50s now. So you got to go Goldberg on the body. Just the look as far as attire and whatnot. I'm gonna actually. I know Bill had a very distinct look, with the black and the MMA gloves, but just my personal preference and going back to when I was younger, I'm gonna go with Kurt because he used to
Nice.
wear kind of the neon. He'd wear like pink or like a neon green, and that the color kind of intrigued me, or I like the bright colors, especially as a kid. So I'm gonna go with Kurt. And then legacy is hard. I mean, I guess I'm gonna unfortunately go with Bill for legacy, just because he's still around, still wrestles from time to time, and I think probably more people are gonna know Goldberg than they will Kurt Hennig. But overall, like I said, in-ring work, the look or attire, the mic, I gave that all to Kurt, so I believe that's 3-2. So I'm gonna go with Kurt Hennig, which is kind of my personal preference anyway. If I felt that Bill took enough of the criteria to advance, obviously I would be honest and give it to him, even though I didn't like it. But damn it, I do love Kurt Hennig, and how can somebody that is perfect not move on to the next round?
Nice. Now,
Yeah.
Tom, you're in the unique position.
Yep.
It's a clean sweep
Yep.
unless you decide to use a veto.
Yeah, and oddly enough, we've had 2 clean sweeps so far.
Yep.
I think right out of the gate, in ring and Mike, Kurt Hennig. Look, Bill. I think in terms of what especially the Vince McMahon idea of the perfect professional wrestler, but just the ideal look in terms of a big menacing man. I don't know if there's many bodies and or looks that have been any better than Bill Goldberg. I mean, just an absolute giant. I mean, put together. Whew. I mean, you talk about carved out of granite. I mean, that was Bill Goldberg. Legacy. I am going to not stretch this on, and I'm gonna go with Kurt. I think sometimes again it's easy to forget the old school stuff and just go with what we immediately remember and what has happened within the last 10 or 20 years versus 30 or 40. And I know Kurt from wrestling with his dad in AWA all the way through. Obviously, I was not a fan of the Mr. Perfect gimmick per se, but as we've said before, talking about making it work. I mean, he was fantastic. So without stretching this on, as I mentioned, I am also going to go with Mr. Perfect, although that makes me sick to say it. But he was damn near perfect in the ring. I'm going to go with Kurt Hennig. Sorry,
Nice.
Goldberg. I mean, and again, I'm a huge WCW fan. The 2 biggest things that they ever, found themselves the beneficiaries of, so to speak, were without question the New World Order and Bill Goldberg. I mean, those 2 entities, if you will, are what propelled them to 83 weeks of victory. But even with that and the impact that Bill had with that, I'm still going to go overall with Kurt Hennig.
And let's not forget real quickly that there's only one man that I know of that has ever thrown possibly a 50, 60-yard pass and also managed to catch his own pass. And I believe that was Kurt Hennig. So this is a well-deserved victory, in my opinion.
Yeah, unless...
Very true.
Yeah, I think... Gosh, didn't recently... son of a gun. The Kansas City Chiefs, the Cheetah.
Oh no!
Didn't he
What?
do that?
Did he really? Tyreek? Or was that a Tyreek
Yeah,
Hill?
Tyreek Hill. Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe his was
Oh
only 40
goodness.
yards though. He may
Yeah.
have done a
Yeah.
40-yard pass,
Yeah.
and I could be
Yeah.
completely wrong. Somebody did something like that recently, but
Yeah.
I digress.
Tyreek's not
Interesting.
perfect like Kurt was.
No,
So.
not at all.
So, Kurt Hennig advances, and he will go up against the winner of Chris Benoit and Brock Lesnar.
Wow.
And this one, I believe, Mike, you go first on this one.
All right. Well, in ring, you got to go obviously with Benoit, and that's all due respect to Brock. Especially, I know Brock's first run. I think his in-ring work was. It sounds weird to say better, because if he was tasked with doing so in his recent run, he probably could have been just as good. I feel like he was, kind of like the Hogan thing where he was just told to be a beast and do, a handful of moves. I think Vince probably told Brock just go out and suplex people and punch, and that's about it. So I think Brock has the potential to be a better in-ring worker than he had been recently, but you got to go with Benoit. Mike, I think I'm going to go with Brock. I know he doesn't really, again, he was on his own more in his first run, talked on the mic a little bit. More recently, of course, he had Heyman, so he didn't really talk at all, but I don't remember any classic Chris Benoit promos, if we're being honest. Probably because there wasn't any. So I'm going to go with Brock. Let's see, just the overall look. I'm going to, I think, it's the attire. I'm going to go with Benoit, because especially if you're talking more current Brock, I wasn't a fan of like just the boots and the MMA shorts. My personal preference. But body, yeah, I mean, it's, again, both guys are in phenomenal shape. Brock was just bigger all around, but it's kind of hard to say which guy had a better body because they were both in fantastic shape. Well, obviously, legacy for, you're going to go with Brock because Brock has the, not only does he have the wrestling, but he's got the collegiate wrestling. He's got the MMA background. So Brock's definitely more of a household name than Chris Benoit is. But so it sounds like, actually, damn it. What I gave the in-ring, I think I went Benoit, Mike, and Legacy. I'm going with Brock. The bodies kind of, and the attire kind of cancel each other out, I think, there. So it sounds like, based on what, 2-1, I'm going with Brock Lesnar.
Nice.
Okay. Yeah, this one is interesting. In-ring work, I agree with Mike. It's funny that a young Brock Lesnar, I mean, he was a high flyer.
Yeah.
People may forget that. But I think obviously to not injure himself, they told him cut out the high flying stuff. But in ring, I mean, I think Chris Benoit, and again, we should probably touch on this. This is just our opinion of the in ring work and that. I mean, no disrespect to anyone. We obviously are well aware, as you all are listening to this, of what Chris Benoit did. But in-ring work, Chris Benoit, an absolute technician, from the Pegasus Kid on through WCW. Obviously, I don't know if I saw him at all in WWE, so I don't know what he accomplished there, but just a fantastic in-ring worker. So I'm going to go with him in terms of in-ring work. On the mic, you flip a coin there. I mean, Jiminy Christmas. I'm not even going to pick one. I'm going to say they were both poor. Look is tough. I mean, look is tough. Brock Lesnar, one of the largest men, I mean, ever, and strength wise, in professional wrestling history. But Chris Benoit, I mean, you talk about the prototypical fire plug. I mean, just chiseled. So, I mean, look, I don't know. It just depends on, and if you're going just the overall body, you'd go Chris Benoit. But if you're going size, you'd go for Brock. So I'm going to do another tie on that one. Then it's
I
down to
guess
legacy.
I guess it also kind of depends on if you're including both of Brock's runs, because, like you said about his in-ring work, like that first run in the early 2000s, I think he was bigger. Brock had, if I remember, he had abs. Versus the more recent run, he wasn't. I mean, he's still jacked, of course, but he wasn't as toned, if I remember, as he was the first time. So that first Brock was a little closer to Benoit, but
Yeah, and what was that he did that I think was the end of his high flying? It wasn't a moonsault. Was it a shooting
uh,
star?
yeah, I think it was a shooting star press, and
Ooh,
oh god, his head hit Kurt Angle like on the right on
yeah.
the ribs or something, and he ended up concussed.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're listening to this, you've seen that, but if by some weird chance you have not seen that, look that up on YouTube. I don't know how he got up and continued to
Huh.
walk. I mean, so that was crazy. But anyway, that has nothing to do with this. Legacy, yeah, Brock Lesnar, again, the New York push, as I said with Hogan in the previous podcast. But, I mean, deservedly so. I mean, he is a monster. But as I also mentioned with Chris, we're going, Japan and Pegasus Kid. I don't know. I mean, I know he won titles. I don't know the extent of what they were. We know the titles, championships in WCW. I think, was he the WWE Heavyweight Champion at one point? I believe he was.
Benoit?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep, he was.
So,
yeah.
I mean, just his accomplishments. And again, no offense to anyone, but just for purposes of this podcast and the in-ring work, I'm going to go with Chris Benoit. So we're going to have our first break here, our first split going into Marty.
Ooh, all right.
Nice.
Well, that definitely put some pressure on me here. So to start out with in-ring work, there's no hesitation on my part. I'm going to go with Benoit. I mean, again, just such a technician, so quick and sharp in the ring. Brock, I think, you know, Mike hit the nail on the head. I think Brock could be a better wrestler. I think he could be a mat-based, submission type wrestler, but Vince tells him what to do. But for in-ring, I'm going with Benoit. Mike's skills, I'm going to agree with Tom. I don't think either of them really could speak very well. I don't think they had the confidence speaking, so that one's a wash. Legacy, you know, Tom, you mentioned what Benoit did, excuse me, out of the ring, that really tarnished, anything about him, but we're talking about just the wrestling aspect. Brock Lesnar is such a big name because of the UFC, and he tried out for the NFL. I'm going to go with Brock on the legacy. Look, that's a close one for me too. Is I think you guys both mentioned Brock Lesnar was humongous, not near as chiseled as like Benoit was, just cut and chiseled. Um, So I mean, man, I'm almost at a standstill with the criteria. It's an interesting matchup, and it's a podcast. What do you call it? Our saying, matchups are everything. I mean, in a real life fight, Brock would have killed him. uh, no question about it. Man, This is a real tough one for me, guys. But I think, I think just on the slightest, I'm gonna give it to Brock.
Oh boy.
Only because I think Brock Lesnar could, he is still wrestling. I think the legacy piece really hurts it, and I'm still trying to be very objective. But I'm gonna go with Brock. That's just what my heart's telling me right now. So we're gonna go with Brock, who will be going up in the second round, unless we have a veto used, I should say, against Kurt Hennig.
Yeah, and you know me, I like to use a veto now and then.
Wait a minute.
And I feel pretty
King?
strongly in this one that I think Benoit should be moving on. However, it's Brock Lesnar. And, how can you go wrong with Brock? I mean, what he has done in the sport is pretty phenomenal, as I like to say all the time. So I'm not going to use a veto to kick Brock Lesnar out.
Yes.
So Brock will advance. I'm, disappointed in both of you, but
we don't want to upset Brock. I've heard rumors. I don't know if it's true, but I've heard rumors that he may be a fan of the podcast. So we don't want to upset Brock. We love you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Lesnar.
And, I've always said that if I, had my druthers and like we had the podcast where, hey, you needed somebody to fight for you, you're sending them down an alley, they have to come out victorious, who would you pick? And which was kind of an interesting discussion. So if you haven't heard that podcast, ladies and gentlemen, check that one out after you finish this one. And also, let me throw in, if you've made it this far in this discussion, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel if you are listening to this on YouTube. If you are listening to this on any other format, any sort of a podcast player, podcast platform, whatever you can do there to support us would also be appreciated. I don't know if you can give us a thumbs up, heart us, etc. But back to what I was getting at with Brock. I've always said that if I had to force to face somebody, in a fight for all, I would choose a larger, muscular guy versus me wanting to fight somebody smaller in stature. Just because of the stamina, the muscular guys typically will gas out quickly. But, and let me say this, Mr. Lesnar, in case he is listening, is the exception to the rule. I'd want not a damn thing to do with Mr. Lesnar, so
nope.
Yeah, I'm not going to piss him off and use my veto, so Mr. Lesnar moves on.
Smart play. So second round, we'll have Mr. Lesnar going against Kurt Hennig. The next bracket we have here it's almost bizarre to say it, but let's just do it. We're going to have John Cena versus Jushin Thunder Liger. And Tom, you're first on this one.
Yeah, wow. Is this one different? There may be people listening to this podcast that aren't as familiar with Thunder. And actually, I just watched something on him, or he was a part of something I was just watching the other day, oddly enough.
Nice.
Big name in Japan. Obviously came to WCW, part of the cruiserweight division there. I don't think really ever made the splash in WCW that he certainly was capable of, but again, there's only so much the wrestler can do. It's up to the booking committee and so forth. But John Cena, so in ring, let's just start going with criteria here. In ring, just because of the wide array of fantastic moves, explosiveness, I'm going to go with Jushin.
Oh, I thought you were describing Cena, but go ahead. Sorry.
For the Mike, I'm not sure if Jushin, and this is my ignorance, not sure how much he spoke, if at all, or WCW didn't really allow him to. I'm sure in Japan it was a different thing, but I haven't seen enough of him in Japan to know. But John Cena's pretty smooth on the mic. I mean, so even with Jushin, if he did do some pretty good mic work in Japan, I'm still going to go with Cena. The look, that's tough because, again, it's completely different here. Cena, not a fan of the jean shorts, but the body is phenomenal. I love I said the masked wrestlers, the painted face wrestlers. I just think it brings a kind of like a unique anonymity to that character. And I've always liked that in wrestling. So for look, I think I'm going to go 50-50 and call that a tie between the two. So then it's on to legacy. I mean, again, you're trying to count Japan into the equation for Jushin because he was never the star here in the States that he was overseas. But John Cena, again, as Marty mentioned, I think maybe it was for Kurt Hennig earlier, that, I mean, John Cena probably could be in. Now, we did a list of the greatest wrestlers of all time. We started with 16. John Cena didn't make it. I think we could all agree that Cena probably would have been maybe 17, 18, 19. He wasn't far from making the list. A lot of people, I think, would have him as maybe a top 10 of all time, especially these younger generation folks, the millennials. But you can't argue with what Cena has accomplished, and I mean, he's kind of carried the WWE on his back for the longest time after the Attitude Era and Stone Cold and The Rock left. So I'm going to go, and I'll say a slight edge to Mr. John Cena in this one.
Wow.
I can
Mike,
hear his music playing in the background right now. I might edit it in, actually, but go ahead.
Mike, did you want to go next?
Yeah, I'll jump in. In-ring work, you got to go Liger. Liger, actually, just to throw this out there, you're going back to when I was a young wrestling fan. I remember a classic match. I believe it might have been Super Brawl 2 with Liger against Flying Brian Pillman.
Oh, nice.
I believe it was what they called the WCW Light Heavyweight Championship. I remember them two having a match that was phenomenal. So anybody that can find that anywhere, whether it's Peacock, YouTube, please watch that match after you listen to this podcast, of course.
I think that's actually known as one of WCW's greatest matches.
I remember watching that as a kid, and even then, I loved that match, and it still holds up. Cena does have good matches, especially, when he has a good dance partner out there with him. Somebody, like just somebody like a Triple H or a CM Punk or a Daniel Bryan. Somebody, that's a good worker. He does an AJ Styles. So Cena's been involved in some classic matches. But just overall ring work, in-ring ability, you got to give the edge to Jushin. Mic skills, by default, you got to go Cena, because I don't know if I've ever heard Liger speak. The look, I think I'm going to go with Jushin on this one.
Nice.
Cena, of course, would get the build, the body, because Cena's in fantastic shape. Jushin, it's hard to say because he always had the full body outfit on. But again, like you, I'm a fan of the guys that wear masks, makeup. Always thought Jushin had just a cool look, especially going back as a kid. I liked it, so I'm going to give Jushin the edge for the look. Legacy, again, difficult. Just like any of these involving Muta, it's hard to say because overseas, I'm sure he's a lot more well-known than he is here in the States, which may be a crime because, Jushin is fantastic. So just by default, I guess you would give it to Cena. And especially like I know this is strictly, supposed to be strictly wrestling based, but Cena, of course, getting into films and stuff now and TV shows, that's of course only making him more of a household name. So, yeah, overall, I guess you're gonna give that to Cena. So, as much as I hate to do it, but yeah, the Mike legacy. I think I'm at 2-2, I believe here, because I gave the in ring and the look to Jushin. But John Cena, I think, is a 16-time champion,
Yeah.
which is hard to overlook. I'm not sure how many titles Jushin's won throughout his storied career. But yeah, just because so much of what Jushin did or a big part of it, I'm sure, was overseas. So it's kind of hard to judge just by default. Then I guess I'm gonna go with Cena to move on, and that is with all due respect, because again, I love Jushin Thunder Liger, but yeah, since it's kind of hard to put a finger on everything he's done throughout his career, since so much of it took place outside of the U.S. I guess, yeah, by default, you got to go with John to move on.
All right. This is an interesting one, but before I get into my actual pick, the coincidence that these two guys are matched up together for me is interesting because I think both Jushin Liger and John Cena may have the shortest arms in the history of not professional wrestling, but mankind. I mean, I've heard rumors that neither Cena nor Liger can tie their own shoes.
both men, both men are half human, half T-Rex.
Absolutely. Like, look at Cena.
Oh, good God.
They have those humongous wristbands that go up to his elbows to cover it. We're not fooled. I mean, we can see that he has about 6 inches of arm length. And yeah, same with Liger. Very short, stubby arms. So, how amazing that these two guys happen to meet each other via our proprietary,
Oh man!
generator. But yeah, I had to throw that out there. They're both very stubby-armed individuals.
Well, that just goes to show you how detailed we are and thoughtful with our answers that you would bring that up.
That'd be a hell of an arm wrestling match, wouldn't it?
Well, they have to be basically French kissing because the arms supposed to be touching to do it. But yeah, it'd be interesting. But in all seriousness, you guys hit the nail on the head. I think with all these things. I will say, if Jushin Liger would have ever been a full-time wrestler in the United States, like, if he was full-time in WCW, I think he definitely would have had a good legacy and be a big name, without question. But he would wrestle for short spurts and, I guess go back to Japan, do one shot, go back. But, all in all, you guys already both picked Cena. I wouldn't use the veto, anyway. I do think Liger is a superior actual wrestler, but I'll agree with you guys anyway and go with Cena. So then that takes us to the next round where Cena will go against the winner of Daniel Bryan and Vader. And I believe I actually go first on this one. So, in-ring work, two totally different styles. And I know I say this a lot too. As our motto states, matchups are everything. Daniel Bryan is a tremendous, technician, high flyer. He's quick. Vader was a very good wrestler for a big man. I mean, the mobility on Vader, obviously way over 300 pounds, and he would do, top rope, moonsaults on occasion or backflips, different things like that. For in-ring work, though, I guess I have to give the slight edge to Daniel Bryan because he is darn good. Mike skills, I'm gonna go with Vader. I don't think Daniel Bryan's horrible on the mic, but there's just something about him that just I don't know. It's not it doesn't jump out to me like wow he's tremendous. But Vader was as menacing on the mic as he was in the ring. You know he cut a real scary promo. So I'm 1-1 now. In ring, Daniel Bryan, Mike Vader. For their legacy, Daniel Bryan is still currently wrestling. I believe he is. I know he was out for a couple years with a neck injury. Vader, to me, I'm going to give the legacy to Vader because he was a huge star in Japan. He came over to WCW, got over in a big way, was the centerpiece for WCW for a couple years as their top heel, going against Ric Flair, Sting. Then he transitioned to WWF and was also, I think, for at least a short period of time, maybe their top heel. I'm going to go with Vader on the legacy for that. For the look, I'm going with Vader. Obviously, his body wasn't what you would call classically fit, but Vader just looked darn neat, especially back in Japan and early WCW when he'd wear the helmet, where the steam would come out. So for me, bottom line on this one, I'm gonna go with Vader. And Tom, I believe you would be next.
Okay. In full disclosure for those listening, I know nothing about Daniel Bryan. I've never seen a match. I've never heard him speak. I know that he was WWE champion, and I think he was, or maybe he is married to one of those Bella twins, but
Yep.
literally, and I know he's been severely injury prone. However, I know Vader all the way again. It's amazing how good AWA was.
Yeah.
I bring them up all the time, and he was Leon Baby Bull White. In Japan, Big Van Vader. Here, I guess he was just Vader. I think they took the Big Van off for some reason, but and it was what in Japan. I think. I mean, enough said after this. And Marty, well, you'll both know right away. I should say Mike too. Was it Stan Hansen that hit him and like shattered his orbital or something, and his eyeball was literally hanging out of the socket on his cheek.
Oh, yeah.
He grabbed his eyeball, forced it back in the socket, and then wrestled a full match.
That is true.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about a man's man. Holy moly. And he did save Sid Vicious's life, if I've heard correctly, after Arn Anderson stabbed him with scissors. So
that is true as well. He was plugging holes with his fingers, possibly.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a way to say that, but that's just what it was. So again, just knowing so much about Vader, the wrestling ability for a big man, literally off the chart. I mean, really, the young Brock Lesnar that we spoke of, that was Leon through his whole career. And again, knowing nothing about Daniel, I'm sure he's a fine wrestler, but we'll cut this one short. I'm going with Big Van Vader.
Nice.
So we have a clean sweep. However, Mike, it's your turn. You could use your veto. What do you think?
I will not use the veto, and I'm actually a little relieved because I do appreciate Vader. I, of course, going back to the 90s and stuff, I do have a lot of memories of Vader, but also being I guess I'd say a current viewer, not as much a fan, because the current product over the last several years has been, we'll say, lackluster to be nice. But I do view the current product as well, so I'm familiar with Daniel. Yeah, I mean, in ring, it is hard to say because Vader was a fantastic big man doing moonsaults and 300 plus pounds, but just overall in ring work, I'd say you have to go with Daniel. Mike skills, Mike skills. I think I'm gonna go with Daniel. Like neither one of these guys is bad on the mic. I mean, it's not like either one of them's Chris Benoit or something, but so they're both serviceable. But I'm gonna go with Daniel. Yeah, the look I'd give to Vader. Just the attire, especially when he came out with that big, I don't know if you'd call it a mask or like that big headpiece thing he would come out to the ring wearing, and he would sit it down on the aisleway and smoke would shoot out of it. That was cool. So I'm gonna give and then just the body. Obviously, you'd go with I guess Daniel Bryan, but overall the appearance with the attire and that cool headpiece, I'm giving it to Leon. And then Legacy's another difficult one because, man, I mean, old school people I think would say Vader, but then more new school people are going to be more familiar with Daniel, not just from his WWE run, but also when he was in like Ring of Honor and his independent stuff. So it's kind of, I think, old school versus new school, but just because I'll go with Vader. So I think it's kind of a 2-2 tie there, but overall, just to make me feel better, I'm going to go with Daniel Bryan.
He did it.
But I'm not going to use
Can you
my
cut
veto.
his mic off?
I'm going to go with Daniel just because you guys both already picked Leon, because I like and appreciate both guys, and it makes me feel good to pick Daniel. But then on the flip side, Van Vader is moving on, so I will not use a veto, and Leon will move on to the next round, deservedly so.
Nice.
But we do love D-Bry.
So we're going to have in the next round, John Cena will be going up against Vader. So that'll be interesting. On to the last two brackets of the first round, because we're real in depth here, guys. We're tearing it up. We have Kurt Angle versus Mick Foley. And Mike, I believe you're first on this one.
All right. Well, in ring, you got to go with Kurt. Again, Mick Foley, not a bad worker. I'd say for the better part of his career, he was more of a brawler, though, where Kurt Angle could, again, do some high-flying stuff. He had the ground attack, the submissions. Kurt was a beast, so you got to go with Kurt. The mic, I guess I'm going to go with Kurt again, although Mick wasn't bad on the mic either. So I'd say just kind of personal preference. I'm going to go with Kurt again. Obviously, the look, you got to go again. I'm going to go with Kurt Angle. Mick Foley, at least is like Mankind with the mask on and stuff, kind of look cool for a heel. But the bodies, there's a bit of a discrepancy there in the bodies. I'm gonna go with Kurt Angle. And then Legacy. Actually, I'm gonna go with Kurt again and give him the clean sweep. And again, Mick, Mick is well known and I think highly appreciated throughout the entire professional wrestling industry. Everybody knows Mick. He's been in classic matches, put his body through hell. Is a legend, definitely. But Kurt Angle is known as being, I think, one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time. Kurt, had a highly successful run in WWE, then went to and actually spent more time, I believe, in TNA or Impact than he did in the WWE, and was just as successful there. Collegiate thing and won the which not many people can say they've done that. So overall legacy, I think you're going to go with Kurt Angle again. I think I got a clean sweep here, 4-0. With all due respect to Mick, but Kurt Angle's a beast. So in my opinion, Kurt is moving on.
All right, and let me just, I'm just going to jump in, and maybe Marty, you were going to say the exact same thing. You're cutting off on my end,
Oh, yeah.
Mike.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, we're losing you. So about 50% of what you said was complete silence. So I don't know if maybe something kicked in on your machine and is running.
Not that I know of. No.
But anyway, I mean, we got the idea, and I think we got the best parts that we needed. But just an FYI, it's the first time it's happened. But anyway, I don't know who's next, but sorry.
Yes.
Go ahead, Tom. You can go next on this.
Okay. Let me see here. All right, just using the criteria. In-ring work, I am going to take a different spin on it from what Mick Foley has done for the sport, giving up his body in terms of in-ring work. And I'm talking, of course, from, Japan to WCW to ECW to WWE. I mean, he has, well, there's no question. We can all agree that nobody has given their body up more for the sport of professional wrestling than Mick Foley. Since that does encompass in-ring work, I'm going to go with Mick Foley. Mike, I think Kurt Angle was probably underrated. I thought he was hilarious. I thought he was damn good on the mic. So I'm going to go with, and Mick is good, don't get me wrong, but I'm going to go with Kurt Angle. Look, yeah, I mean, if we're just taking bodies, I really appreciate Mick Foley because he makes my body look good. But you got to go with Kurt Angle. Legacy. And this always seems to be the big one here for me. You're talking a guy who, was only WWE, for the big portion of his career. And then, he was severely injured. We all know the painkiller story. God bless him. He's another wonderful story of a, strong-willed person that has overcome. I know he's still struggling today, but he's off the painkillers and doing the best that he can. I would imagine a lot of that stems from breaking his neck in the Olympics. I think it just only got worse from there for the poor guy. Obviously, did phenomenally in TNA as well as WWE. Mick Foley, though, as I mentioned, just an enormous star and a draw in, everywhere from Japan to WWE. Didn't have certainly the gold, I don't think, that Kurt Angle had in his shorter career. But legacy-wise, just not looking solely at gold. And again, you're talking about Mick Foley, who, oh my God, was Mick Foley. Mankind, Cactus Jack. I don't think Dude Love ever got over, but made multiple different characters work. I still appreciate him more as Cactus Jack, but where Kurt Angle's always just been the Olympic hero, Kurt Angle, and nothing against him. Why would you leave that? It was perfect for him. It was true, and he's certainly a true badass. But with all that said, I'm going to give a slight edge to Mick Foley to move on, in my opinion. So
nice.
There you have it.
Interestingly enough, we're on the second last match of the first round. This is the first time that there's going to be a tiebreaker here. So there's some pressure being put on me.
Well, we had one other tiebreaker, and I can't remember who it was. We did.
I thought the
It
other
might have
ones.
been.
It was Benoit and Lesnar, I believe.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I went
Oh, you're
Benoit.
right.
Mike went
You're
with
right.
Brock. So.
Oh, correct. Thank you. Thank you. This one seems more intense for me because it's a tiebreaker for me, my first one. But Mike picking Angle, Tom picking Foley. In ring work for me, definitely Angle. And again, Tom, you had said no one has put their body through more and given more to the business. I totally agree. But for this criteria, I'm just looking at it as their in-ring work of what type of a wrestler they are. Kurt Angle's heads and above better there. Um, Mike skills, I agree with you, Tom, that Kurt Angle is underrated. He was hilarious. The humor was great. It was natural for him. When he was angry, he could cut a pretty good heel promo. Mick Foley though was darn good on the mic as well,
Oh yeah.
especially in some of his iterations of like Mankind. The dark kind of a promo. I'm gonna say that's a wash, a tie for them. For the look, um, the look obviously with the body, Angle's body's better, but I mean Mick Foley had some cool looks. I mean Cactus Jack, he was just the demented, deranged, I mean, toothless psychopath, and he looked that part. He was amazing. Mankind is, you've heard Thomas said it quite a few times, but I'm also not the biggest fan of WWF/WWE, but the Mankind gimmick was pretty darn good, and the costume with the leather mask was really neat looking. So, boy, I'm almost going to say the looks a wash. Then you go down to legacy. Um, the legacy Kurt Angle in the period of time that he was really on top in WWE. He was in there sharing the spotlight though with guys like Undertaker and Stone Cold. Um, he had some injuries. Then yeah, he went to TNA, and unfortunately, TNA just wasn't well run. It didn't have the biggest following. Foley spent the majority of his career in WWF, which is unfortunately the biggest stage there is for professional wrestling. For legacy, I think most people definitely know Foley for his death-defying stunts. You could call it, flying 20 some feet in the air. Just based on that, it's this one is actually really tough for me, but think I think I am going to also go with Mick Foley. So, Mike,
Nice.
you picked Angle, but are you passionate enough to use your veto? Put Angle through.
Whew. Mm.
Sounds like you're thinking about it.
I
It's
know I've
true.
said this a few times, but I am thinking about it, but I think I'm gonna hold off because I do think if we're just talking, best package, I think Kurt's probably a better overall package. Just like I said, the in ring, the body, the look, than Mick. But again, I do appreciate Mick and what he put his body through, and disparage the good name of Mick Foley. So I deserve to go on, but I will not use a veto.
Okay.
All right.
So, Mick Foley will be advancing, and he will go against the winner of. This is our last first round matchup. In this, I think this is the toughest one for me. Eddie Guerrero and AJ Styles. And
Yeah.
Tom, you go first on
Wow.
this barn burner.
Wow. Okay. let's go out of the gate here again with making sure I'm transparent. I know more about Eddie Guerrero than I do AJ Styles. I believe, and I could be getting my timeline wrong here, I know of AJ Styles initially from TNA,
Yeah.
and then I think from there he went on to kind of increase his legacy, so to speak, with the Bullet Club. And then from there he was WWE. But again, I could be wrong, so don't
You
hate
are
me.
correct.
But from the little bit I did get to see of AJ Styles, as Marty mentioned for Kurt Angle, I mean TNA was just nothing. It was just doomed for failure. I really hoped, just like AEW now. I tried in the beginning. I wanted so bad to like it. I wanted to watch wrestling again. I haven't watched wrestling since when did I stop watching wrestling? You guys know it was when Shane McMahon came out on WCW. Was that 1999 or 2000 or something? I don't know, but it's been a long time.
Yeah. 01 actually,
Oh,
so
2000.
20 years.
So I have not watched wrestling in 20 years. So AJ I didn't quite see as much, but I do know that AJ Styles is probably one of the greats of today. Eddie Guerrero, wow. Whew. I mean, man, just a fantastic talent. I mean, the whole package. I mean, Mike, look, in-ring work. I mean, could wrestle about any style, strong style, high flying. I mean, he had it all. Obviously, legacy and a career cut short with Eddie. Uh, you got with AJ Styles. He's a smaller guy, or maybe not too much smaller. I guess Eddie wasn't overly big either. But the thing is, though, what makes it tough is AJ is almost out of that same mold. I mean, I don't know about really wrestling strong style, but I mean certainly has a multitude of abilities. Has the high flying. Can be as Eddie as well. The good guy or a bad guy, a heel or a baby face, and can pull off either just as well. Probably in a slight edge, just because I do know more of what he had done. And again, I'm a WCW fan, NWA, and all of the iterations of the NWA or all the alliances, all the way up through WCW. And that's what I know more about. I know more about Eddie. I know Eddie is, I mean, he's an all-time great. I mean, I don't even know if he'd be in everybody's top 25, but, he's probably a top, well, I'll make it really broad here. Certainly a top 50 of all time, I would think would be Eddie. I don't know if AJ is quite in there yet. Certainly could be. But so just for those reasons, I'm going to go with Eddie. Slight edge to Eddie Guerrero.
Nice.
And Mike, if you want to go next.
Yep, and hopefully I don't cut off here.
What did he say?
Oh no. Let's see. In ring, yeah, this might be, well, I'm sure we've said this multiple times already, but might be one of the tougher matchups because,
this was the toughest one for me, and I know Marty mentioned it too. It was the toughest.
And I agree with what you said. Like, these guys are both very similar in size and their ability. So yeah, I mean, in ring, it's man. In ring, I guess, because both guys, let me preface it by saying both guys are phenomenal. Well, pardon the pun, but both guys are phenomenal.
Yep.
But I think because I think I saw probably more of Eddie. I didn't see as much of AJ and TNA, WCW and WWE. So I'm just, by default, I'm going to go with Eddie. Mike, I guess to AJ. I don't know. Neither guy was terrible. but neither one of them is, neither one of them's, Ric Flair or Cena, anything like that. So I'm just, hey, look, yeah, that one's tough as well because neither guy stands out heads and, stands out above the other.
Oh no.
AJ wears tights. It's like either guy, they're not overly flashy in their appearance or anything. So it's just because AJ is more, more fresh, saw him more recently, I'm gonna go with AJ. And then Legacy, man, that's another difficult one. Like so many of them because AJ, big part of his career was in TNA, but I'd say he almost was TNA at least at a point in time. And then you have the New Japan. Now, of course, he's still to this day in his mid-40s, one of the best workers on the entire roster. But Eddie, had the WCW, then in WWE was the champ, and also one of the best in the business at the time. So, I mean, neither guy is going to probably be remembered as like a Hogan or a Ric Flair or even Cena. So that it's kind of hard to say, but right now it's 2-1 AJ. I'll just for the heck of it, I'm going to give it to Eddie for the legacy. To push through into the next round, I'm just going to go with Eddie again, just because AJ is more fresh. I've seen him more recently. I'm going to go with AJ.
Wow.
And if let me just jump in here real quick, if you don't mind, because we don't do any prep for these shows. So this is all straight from the heart. We're going from the gut and, the knowledge that we have of, in this case, pro wrestling. But after I make a comment, sometimes I'll do some quick research, and I just wanted to correct myself. Actually, Eddie Guerrero is the smaller man between him and AJ Styles. AJ has a few inches on him. They're about the same weight. So if you're just looking at height, AJ Styles is a few inches taller. So just wanted to clarify that. And also, again, if you're listening to this on YouTube and you haven't already done so, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel. We are new. We are struggling to grow. Any help would be greatly appreciated. But my apologies, Marty. Go ahead.
All right. Well,
and real quick, I would have thought Eddie was bigger, but
yeah.
Man,
so,
Eddie, I guess because Eddie was thicker.
Yes, yeah, more heavily muscled. But the funny thing is, they're about the same weight, literally about identical weights. I guess when you're a little shorter, you pack on a little bit more dense muscle.
Yeah, this one though, for me, this is the toughest one, definitely for me. Both of these guys actually have a very similar style, both very acrobatic, high flying, athletic. So when you're talking about in ring work, I know AJ Styles is still wrestling. AJ Styles, I think, in the last year has slowed down, it seems, a little bit. And they have him paired with this 7'5" monster right now as a tag team. But we're still talking about the overall here. AJ Styles, as his nickname would suggest, was phenomenal, but so was Eddie Guerrero. I mean, Eddie Guerrero could just go all night long. I'm gonna say a tie for in-ring work. For mic skills, I'm gonna go with Eddie Guerrero. Eddie Guerrero could have some heated, good heel promos. when he would always talk about lying, cheating, and stealing. He was the mouthpiece of the LWO, the Latino World Order in WCW. AJ Styles, to me, it's a little awkward on the mic sometimes. He's not horrible, but I'm actually going to go with Eddie on that. Look, Eddie Guerrero was a smaller stature individual when he first came into WCW. I think he was in a car accident and we took several months off, and apparently he hit the gym not once a day or twice a day, probably 12 times a day. I don't know that he left the gym because he came back about 30 pounds bigger of muscle. He looked phenomenal. AJ Styles, handsome wrestler, especially this time in TNA. I think he was a heartthrob. The look is very close for me as well. Legacy, this one, I think kind of pushes it a little bit for me in this direction. AJ still wrestling. I don't know what overall legacy he still has, but Eddie Guerrero to me, Eddie Guerrero started out wrestling in, Mexico and AAA and was a huge star back then. I think he was a masked wrestler. Um, he came to WCW and at first was, I think a jobber. Then he was part of the like the luchador wrestlers. But in one of the few times that I will say that I think WWE got it right, I will say they gave the smaller guys like Guerrero, Benoit, Malenko, they gave them a chance and booked them as equal to the bigger guys, which I think was a tremendous move because Eddie Guerrero held his own, and I think his legacy of being one of those first smaller guys to win the world title, to hold it. I don't think he held it for a real long period of time, but he was actually a believable world champion. The Guerrero name is tremendous. I think for worldwide in professional wrestling with, Mondo, Hector, Chavo, I'm going to give the legacy to Guerrero. Um, so for me, this is a very, very tough one, but a slight edge. I'm going to go with Guerrero on this one. So I believe that's 2 for Guerrero. Mike, you went with AJ Styles.
Here we go.
What are you thinking here? Are you okay with that, or are you maybe going to use your veto?
No. Again, this is one of those cases with both guys. They're so close, so similar. That yeah, it's really it was hard. That's why I said I ended up with a 2-2 after all the criteria and just kind of went on, the fact that I've seen AJ more recently than I've seen Eddie's work. So that was kind of the deciding factor for me. So yeah, it was a difficult one. So either way, I'm happy. Eddie deserves it, so I'm not gonna use the veto.
All right. Well, our second round is set. And just real quick rundown, then we'll jump into it. We have Booker T against Great Muta, Kurt Hennig versus Brock Lesnar, John Cena versus Big Van Vader, Mick Foley against Eddie Guerrero. So it's a stacked second round. And for this one, I think it's me actually going first. And I hate that. I'm about to just switch it up since I'm hosting this one and pick someone to go first. Booker T versus Muta. Literally 2 of my favorites of all time. Different generations. Obviously, Muta was, definitely in his prime in the, later 80s from, NWA wrestling, Booker T from, wow, I mean, Booker T was in his prime all through the 90s. Um, you know, later 90s, I should say, WCW and the 2000s, but these are two of my favorites of all time. So, in ring work, gosh almighty. Booker T, incredibly athletic, smooth as silk. He could do, some high flying moves, a lot of kicks, but he could do a lot of power moves. Muta didn't have the overall repertoire. Like, he didn't do power moves, but Muta was just, I think we've all said, Muta was just in another level with his quickness, his creativity in the ring. For in-ring work, oh, man, I just don't know that I can pick either of them, or if I'm going to say it's a wash. I'm going to say it's a wash on in-ring work. For the look, Booker T, incredible body, handsome. I love Booker T. Muta, though, just with his outfits, the Japanese inspired, gi on occasion, the makeup, the mist. I'm going to slightly give Muta the edge and look just based on that. But as far as actual body, I would go with Booker T. But for the look, I'm going to say Muta. For Mike's skills, obviously, we're going to go with Booker T because, well, Muta, I don't think he ever spoke. So then that takes us to Legacy, where this is another close one. I mean, to me, I think Booker T is one of the most respected wrestlers from the late WCW era. Obviously, the WWE brass thought a lot of him because they brought him over and they actually didn't squash him like they did most of the other, WCW wrestlers. They gave Booker T a big push and he ran with it. Muta, for Legacy, Muta, he was in, NWA for. I'm trying to think how long he was in the NWA. It wasn't as long as I think it should have been, or we would want him to have been there. I think it was maybe 2 years, if not even only a year and a half. He was so good. It seems like it would have been longer, but he wasn't in there quite as long. Then I know he went back to Japan and wrestled for many years. Then he'd make a couple, one shots or a couple very short stints as a part of the NWO. I know in the late 90s when the NWO was getting watered down, and I don't mean that because of Muta's involvement at all, but so for Legacy, for me, just based on the United States and the overall appeal, I'm gonna go with Booker T. And with that being said, this is crazy. I never in a million years thought I'd ever pick anyone over Muta. Oh boy, I'm so slightly going to go with Booker T. This is a tough one, but
Oh boy.
I'm picking Booker T, but I can't believe it. I never thought I'd go against Muta, but it was just tough.
And as almost happens in every episode, I was just a split second away from slamming my headset down and walking away. But out of being professional, I'll stick around. Who's
Sorry
next?
about that. And then I guess Tom, you would I think be second on this one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, extremely, extremely difficult. In-ring work, Booker T. I will quit using phenomenal as much as I can, although for purposes of the drinking game, maybe I will say it. I will. Phenomenal worker. Really nothing Booker T couldn't do. And a perfect marriage between a big, big guy and athletic ability. I mean, really was a joy to watch. Quick little caveat here. We've been slowly working on trying to get some guests for the tournament podcast. spice things up a bit. And on one of these wrestling podcasts, as we'll continue to keep wrestling in the forefront of what we do, I'd love to get Booker T.
that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh God, yeah.
I mean, right now our podcast, we probably couldn't get a hobo off the street to want to join us, but if we grow a little bit and have any kind of online presence, that would be an absolute honor to have Booker T on the show. In-ring work, I'm going to go with Great Muta and a slight edge because I think he was transformational in a way. I think, again, what we mentioned in the first round, what he brought to the table, we had never seen before, and he could do it all. Mike, obviously Booker T, not just because Muta never said a word, but Booker T was damn good on the mic. He was really, really good. Look, I'm going to go with Muta again because I'm not just taking body into account. I am taking in the whole package, and I like the painted face. I like the green mist. You know, the what was it, like samurai type garb that he wore to the ring, even though that came off before he got in the ring. But anyway, I just like the whole package. And poor Booker. And you won't convince me that Vince didn't try to squash every WCW guy that he had. And I think he tried to squash Booker too with that stupid, wasn't he like a king or something? But Booker T was so good, just like Dusty with the stupid polka dots, that Booker was able to pull it off. And he made it work. And Vince, I don't think, had a choice but to push him because he was just so popular and so good. But even, with the little crown and the silly stuff they did there, my look, though, is still, I'd go against Booker on that one. But it wasn't his fault. We're still going Muta. So then we come down to legacy and career. I think I'm, 2-1 Muta. I am, again, taking the total package in terms of Japan to the United States for Muta into consideration. Booker T, even looking at Harlem Heat, and no offense to Stevie Ray, but a little more limited. Booker carried that package regardless of management, or the tag team in and of itself. But Muta, accomplished so much in so many different stops. And did so with really not getting the push. He had such a lasting impact. And if you're listening to this and you're not familiar with the great Muta, you can look him up in Japan in his early years, and he's great. But just look up some of the it was WCW, but of the NWA when they were part of that alliance, managed by Gary Hart, and just look at some of that work. He's just a joy to watch. But then I can say so was Booker T. So it's what makes this so difficult. Yep. So I'm going to take a page out of Marty's book. And he went by an absolute shred to Booker T. I am going to go also with an absolute shred, but to the great Muta.
Ooh.
And we're going to put some pressure on Mike here. And I said we'd love to have Booker T as a guest. Hopefully he doesn't listen to this.
All right. Well, to kind of make it quick here, the in-ring work, I kind of did, I think, the same thing Marty did, kind of a wash. Both guys were fantastic, maybe slightly different styles, but both were equally as entertaining and fantastic in the ring. So that's a wash there. Mike, like you said, by default, you got to go with Booker. The look I gave to Muta, actually, because
nice.
Again, like you, Tommy, I'm a big fan of the makeup, and let's not forget that Muta rocked both the makeup and, in I think the later years, actually wore a mask as well.
Yeah, I think he's still going today.
I think he is, and successfully doing so. So yeah, the look, and that's again no disrespect to Booker. He had a fantastic look and a great physique, but yeah, especially as a kid, loved the guys with the makeup on, and so yep, we're gonna give Muta that. Legacy, I gave to Booker, and again, that's another one of those hard ones, just because Muta spent so much more time over in Japan, where I'm sure his legacy is heads and above what Booker T's is, here. Over there, Muta's an absolute legend. But in the States, obviously, Booker T is going to probably be more, looked upon higher, I would think, just because of the name recognition. But so I gave Booker the legacy. So, 2-1? I've got Booker. So, unless Tommy chooses to use a veto to move on Muta, I went ahead and went with Booker T. And again, all due respect, love Muta, but just, since so much of his work took place overseas, it's hard to judge as much as we can with the Booker. So that's why, Booker by default got the mic and the legacy on my end. So
Yep.
Booker's moving on.
Well, wait a minute. Before you say Booker's moving on, we've got someone who has been unpredictable. He's throwing out his vetoes like no one's business. Tom, are you going to do it again?
I am
what you wild card.
I was just going to say, I'm what you call a wild card. And we start the podcast off, or we have, in our About Us, and that we are three brothers. And sometimes you can say things to brothers maybe you shouldn't say to other people. And we'll beep this out. Now, at some point, and I was mentioning this to a buddy at work, when we grow a little bit, we'll probably do a Patreon where you can hear things in their entirety. So anything that's bleeped out on YouTube or Stitcher, you can hear on Patreon. And I say that because I'm going to tell my brothers right now, you guys. I'm using my veto.
Yes!
And I am moving the great Muta forward over Booker T. No offense, Booker T. Now, my brothers can use one of their vetoes if they would like, because we agreed that you can use it whenever because it's yours. I only have one. I've chosen to use it here in round 2. Another quick little side note. In terms of recording time, we are at an hour and 50 minutes, so we might want to rapid fire through some of these.
Oh, poor. I'll just jump in and say I will not be using my veto, although the prospect of having Booker T as a guest was good. Yeah. I'm assuming we just shot that in the foot.
Nice job.
Yep.
Jesus Christ. Mr. Huffman, I apologize, but in all seriousness, right off the top, with this matchup, I had already made up my mind no matter which one of them won, I wouldn't use a veto because it was that close. And just, Tom ruined it. Using it, that's cool. But, Muta's going to go on. Muta will go on, guys, against the winner of Kurt Hennig versus Brock Lesnar. And, Mike, you go first on this one.
All right. And, since we're running long, I'll kind of rapid fire here. In ring, you're going to go with Kurt. The mic, I guess I'll give to Kurt, just because Brock has had a mouthpiece for a good chunk of his career in Paul Heyman. So I'm going to give that to Kurt. The look, the body on Brock, though, is so phenomenal. It's hard to go against him because he is the prototypical Vince McMahon guy. As much as I liked Kurt and the colors and stuff of the singlets, the body and everything on Brock, he's a beast. So I'll give the look to Brock. And, legacy will, I'm sure, go to Brock just because of everything he's done both in and outside of the company. He's going to have a bigger legacy than Kurt. Oh man, I know we said a lot. It's a difficult one, but they're never easy, and that's the beauty of the podcast. But just for my own personal preference, if I had to watch one of these two guys work a program right now, the name I'd be punching in to the search engine would be Kurt Hitting. So Kurt
Nice.
is moving on, for me at least.
Nice. Tom, you're next. What are you thinking on this one?
And to be as expeditious as possible here, I'm going to go with Kurt Hennig as well. I just think what he's done, even though I think he passed in his early 40s. I mean, that is just shocking to think that he was that young. But what he accomplished from the AWA, all the way through, WCW and WWE, where again Brock, I think I mentioned it in the first round, has simply been, well, in terms of major promotions, simply been. I think he started off in that Ohio Valley. I don't know his entire lineage, but it's been WWE only. Obviously, UFC helped his brand quite a bit, but just in-ring work, total package, mic skills. I'm going with Kurt Hennig.
All right. For me, I'll again for brevity, I'll also go with Kurt Hennig. Just I think he was one of the best of all time. I mean, he was beloved in the industry. Just fantastic worker. And real quick, just on a personal note, I love that, as Tom has mentioned, we don't talk about any of these beforehand or do research, but I do really appreciate how you mentioned, like, how he started in AWA. Even I forget every once in a while some of those things, but I do agree. I'm going to go with Hennig also, which sets up a dynamite semifinal match between Muda and Hennig. But let's move on to the next round here. We have John Cena versus Big Van Vader. And Tom, you're first on this one.
All right, again, in the spirit of being as quick as possible here, and again, if anybody knows anything about the Tournament Podcast and knows my history, I am not a fan of WWE. I say it a few times in every wrestling podcast. That's all I think Cena literally was born and bred in WWE. So I don't think he's had any other stops. I could be wrong. Could be, another Ohio Valley type thing. But I just think, again, from Japan, multiple stops. International. I mean, not that John Cena's not, but I mean, just Van Vader, all the accomplishments worldwide. I'm going with Big Van Vader.
Nice.
Okay.
And just to add, you mentioned Cena and OVW. Cena actually was in Ohio Valley. I think it was him. Was it him, Lesnar, Randy Orton, and Shelton Benjamin were kind of the four main guys all at one time?
Wow.
Was Batista in there too?
Actually, yeah. I forgot.
The
Dave Batista, yep, and the prototype, John Cena.
Mike, you can take this one. It's
all right, I will go second then, and man, yeah. Without going through all the criteria, I mean, I just kind of looking at the guys and just kind of I'm trying to think back to how I rated them the first time around. Cena, of course, like I said, is not a terrible worker. Has had some classic matches, but I think a lot of it is dependent on who he's in there with. Had a great body, but the jorts were odd. But he's a big global star. Vader, one of the best big men of all time. Phenomenal worker for the size. Had a good look. Again, I think Vader, had a big run over in Japan. Then, of course, was big over here as well in WCW and tapered off quite a bit in the WWF, but it still was, had that WWF backing, so people would know who he is just from being on the program. But yeah, my gut just tells me, man, Big Van Vader. So, yep, we're going to move on Vader. Unless Marty chooses to go the other way. Let's see.
This is going to be actually a big big shock, I think, here, guys.
Oh no.
I'm actually going to go ahead and not do anything. I agree. I agree. It's
Uh,
it's actually close just because Cena's currently active, and it's just it's easier when somebody's present that you're like, oh yeah, they're better than someone you haven't seen in 10+ years. But Vader, again, one of the best of all time for big men. So yep, I agree. I'm gonna go along with you guys. Vader on the clean sweep will
Neat.
go against the winner of Mick Foley and Eddie Guerrero. I think I go first on this one. Um, this one, yeah, I know we're trying to be really quick. This one, again, if you want to talk about a drinking game, I mention this quite often. Our motto, it's all about the matchup. You couldn't be as opposite for these two guys. You have one guy that's a little bigger built, lower, methodical, and Foley. You had a smaller Guerrero who was lightning quick and, agile and high flyer. Um, both guys have a tremendous legacy in the business. Man, to me, I'm just the thing I think that pushes me forward on this is the actual in-ring work. I am a fan of Foley. And I picked Mick last round to advance, but I think I have to go with Eddie Guerrero on this one, just based on his tremendous in-ring work. I'm gonna go with Eddie Guerrero, and I think let's see, one of you guys can take it. I forget who goes next.
I can hop in and make it quick. I'm gonna agree. Yeah, again, I know we already said I think we all appreciate what Mick did for the business and what he put his body through, and he's been involved in some classic moments. But yeah, overall, Eddie Guerrero, just the in-ring ability, and you know, maybe one of the I don't know if it's one of the more underappreciated guys. He was just a fantastic worker, and yeah, got that one short, I think it was a couple of month long stint with the title, but probably should have had it more than once and for a longer stretch of time. But yeah, just again, my gut tells me between these two guys, Eddie's the more deserving one to be, considered the best of the rest, more so than Mick. So I am moving Eddie on.
Nice. Tom has already used his veto as per usual. So, but we'd like to hear who do you pick though? Anyway.
Yeah, and really quickly, I would have agreed. I would have selected Eddie in this matchup. I just think he's more of the traditional style. I don't even know if that really makes sense, but I just think he's more of what you think of as a prototypical successful pro wrestler. He was the total package. Mick relied on shock value, I think, to really get himself over, which there's nothing wrong for that. You need all sorts of styles in pro wrestling. If it was cookie cutter, then, it would have been a dead sport long, long ago. So, but Eddie is just prototypical. Literally could do it all. I mean, so, yeah, Eddie Guerrero.
Nice.
Well, it's official, guys. Our semifinals are set. We have the Great Muta versus Kurt Hennig and Big Van Vader versus Eddie Guerrero. And we're going to start this first one, the Muta versus Hennig. And Mike, you're up.
Oh man, woo-wee. Yeah, this
10
is
seconds because it's the semifinal.
in ring. I'm gonna do the same thing I did, I think, with Muta and Booker T. I'm gonna say it's a wash because yeah, both guys are fantastic in ring workers. It's kind of hard for me to really pick one over the other, so I'm just gonna call that a wash. Again, I know we keep saying by default you got to go with the other guy over Muda for Mike, just because Muda, I don't think ever spoke. Giving Muda the look, legacy. Yeah, I mean it's again, we love Kurt. I don't think here in the States, again, Kurt's probably going to be, well, maybe, I guess depends on if you're talking to wrestling purists, who's going to be remembered more fondly. Obviously, in Japan, it's going to be Muda. But here in the States, the true wrestling fan may pick Muda as well. Oh, damn it. I think I'm myself convinced, as much as I love Kurt Hennig and he is perfect,
Nice.
I'm going to go with the great Muda.
Ooh, okay. Well, Tom, you can go next. I think we probably know who you're going to pick, but we'll let you.
Yeah, I mean, without any suspense, I used my veto to get Muda this far, but that was in that round. So then when you have the next matchup, I am going to also go with Great Muda. But I mean, when you're looking at Kurt Hennig, it's like, my God, how can you go against him? I mean, he. Oh, I don't want to say he was perfect. I mean, but from mic to in-ring work, I mean, look, I mean, he was about as good as it gets. I mean, he's right there with Eddie Guerrero. I mean, probably even a little step above Eddie in my book. But yeah, great Muda. We haven't used the criteria. What I've used in past podcasts is I'm starting a promotion. Who do I want to hire to be my bell cow, as they say? Who's going to be my number one guy? So I want, to bring eyeballs to the promotion, publicity, butts in seats. Am I going to take Great Muda in his prime or Kurt Hennig in his prime? I just think the allure, that mystery around Great Muda. And he was a tweener. He never really was a heel. He never really was a baby face. He was in that middle ground that not many guys can pull off. So for those reasons and just my personal affinity, maybe we can get the Great Muda on here as a guest someday. I'm going to go with the Great Muda as well.
So it's a clean sweep with Muda, unless I would use my veto. But this is pretty much the same scenario with the matchup last round with Booker T and Muda. It's so close for me. I would not use my veto either way because I think it's that close. But you guys both went with Muda, and what's funny is, Tom, you mentioned the one criteria that we haven't been using for this, episode. But like you said, if you could pick one guy to start your promotion, and be the face of the promotion, that actually swayed me the other way. Honestly, I would pick Hennig just based on the fact that, well, he talks. I mean, that's a huge piece of your character.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Your mic skills and to connect with the crowd as a heel, or a baby face. So, interestingly enough, I said before, by the slightest edge, I went with Booker, and I never thought I'd go against Muda. I did.
Oh, no.
This is the second time, and I'm ashamed of myself.
I am too.
I don't blame you guys. I love Muda, but I'm going to pick Hennig. But it doesn't matter. Muda still moves on. He's going to be in our finals against the winner of Big Van Vader and Eddie Guerrero. And Tom, you're first on this one.
Whoa.
Yeah, 10 seconds.
I want to be quick, but I'm like, as soon as you say the names, I'm like, oh my God, I don't know who to pick. Well, I guess I do. I'm going to go on a slight edge. Again, I don't want to sit here and reiterate everything that we've already mentioned, but just in terms of, again, a total package, overall draw, I mean, certainly the mic, as you mentioned, is a critical piece in professional wrestling. Nothing that Eddie Guerrero couldn't do. I'm going to give the slight edge to Eddie.
Ooh. Okay. Mike, do you want to go next? If not, I'll take it. Well, if you don't mind, I'll jump in anyway, because since we're down here in the semifinals, I got to be honest, Tom. What you said before, I love it. That criteria that we haven't been using, but since it's a semifinal, if I had to pick one wrestler out of these two to be the head of my promotion and to be the man out of these two, I'm going to use that as my deciding, criteria. I have to go with Vader because Vader is so big and menacing that he's the absolute perfect heel. Um, he's athletic. He can do so much in the ring where he could also be a baby face, but just his size, the look, I would go with Vader based on that, with that criteria. So that would be one Guerrero, one Vader, Mike, and probably the biggest hot seat yet in the semifinals.
Actually, this one is fairly easy for me.
Wow.
No, I'm just initially I was going to say just going off the matchup, like who would I rather see Muta work a program with? I think just my
We
first
know
thought
who the
was him and
Japanese
Eddie.
audiences would go with.
My first thought was him and Eddie, both being similar size, would put on a hell of a match. But on the flip side, like Marty said, just if you're going on that criteria of starting a promotion, are you going to go Eddie or Vader? And I agree. You would probably, at least in my opinion, would go Vader just because of the look, the size, and he could do a lot of the things that, like we've already said, a lot of things that guys half his size could do with the, coming off the top rope with moonsaults and all that. So Vader was a phenomenal, big man, and I think he would be a solid heel to start your brand new organization with. Yeah, I mean just the overall in ring ability, I feel like you're gonna go Eddie. But just to make it make it quick here, I'll just use that criteria if I'm starting a company. Do I want Eddie or Vader? And I think I'm going to go with Marty on this one. I think I would probably pick Vader to start my company.
Well, I'm going to veto.
So,
wait. I don't have a veto left. Son of a.
He's using.
So,
I was going to say, Tom's using a second veto. This is
wait a minute.
Unprecedented. So, Mike went with Vader. We have a finals here for our podcast, The Best of the Rest, of the Great Muta versus Big Van Vader. Boy, I think I actually go first on this one, and for the sake of moving this along, expediency, I'm a liar, but I'm not a great big liar. I've lied twice. I've gone against Muta. I can't do it a third time. And
Nice.
It's not just even based on that I don't want to be known as the biggest liar in this podcast. I mean, Muta really is just, he's on another level. I think Vader's still one of the best big men of all time, but Muta is just so phenomenal in his look, his overall mystique and appeal, his in-ring work. Long story short, guys, I'm going with Muta.
Nice.
All right. Well, Mike, you want to jump in next?
Yeah, this is going to alleviate a lot of the suspense. I am going to go with Muta as well. Yeah, both guys, I said Vader. We've already pretty much said everything you can say. Phenomenal big man, good look. Muta, great in-ring worker, also a good look. If you're starting a company, either way, you couldn't go wrong. You could take them both 1 and 2 to be your top heel and your top baby face if you wanted to put Muta on the baby face side there. So yeah, either way, you can't go wrong. So yeah, in this case, I'm just gonna go with personal preference. I think I tend to go more for the the smaller, not small, but not, I'm generally not as much of a fan of the big men, like just throw like a Big Show or Andre, somebody that's more limited. Not that Vader was limited by any means, but I'm more of a the in ring technicians, the workers, the speed of like a Muda or the previously mentioned AJ Styles. So I am taking Muda as my best of the rest. Tommy, what do you think? Not that it matters.
No, it doesn't matter at all, but I, of course, would go with Muda. Now, ironically, ladies and gentlemen, if I wouldn't have used my veto to move the Great Muda on, he would not have won this whole thing. So what is the irony there? But again, it's all about the matchups. We say that every week. It is our tagline. The Great Muda, just obviously he's winning this tournament. But if you haven't seen him, as I mentioned earlier, his snap elbow drop coming off the rope, as much as like, oh, it's an elbow drop, it was wonderful. I mean, it was new. It was something we hadn't seen before. His what he did, like a handspring elbow that he would do to guys when he threw them into the corner turnbuckle. Even his moonsault press. It wasn't like you saw that all the time back then. I mean, the mist. I mean, obviously that was, Kabuki, which ironically was managed by Gary Hart, at least in some portions of his career as well. Muda was like a Kabuki 2.0. But he had all these signature moves, and they were all rapid. They were quick. They were all snapping. But yeah, when you talk about a deserving champion of this tournament, the Great Muda, without question.
Absolutely. It's official. The winner of the Best of the Rest podcast, the Great Muda. And again, just to reiterate, Tom, how bizarre that, yes, if you wouldn't have used, your veto, I'm not sure would Booker have been in the finals here and winning it.
That's
There's
interesting.
A big possibility.
It is distinctly. So, yeah, I mean, but that's why our podcast is the fastest growing on YouTube. I'm not going to say on Stitcher and Spotify because I think we only have one podcast uploaded to those platforms, but that'll soon change. But yeah, it's something different. This format that we use, accompanied with the veto, I think it makes for some exciting listening, and that's what we had today in this 2-hour-long podcast.
Absolutely. We appreciate everybody listening, and again, if you could like, share, subscribe on YouTube and or the other platforms that we're on, it'd be greatly appreciated, as we're three brothers. Also, not to put pressure on anyone, we are all in a financial bind. If you guys want to send a donation, I'm going to put a link. And I'm just joking there, guys. But
and who?
Go ahead.
No, and I would just say, who knows, too, with Muda being named the best of the rest, this could potentially set up a matchup later on down the line with the best of the rest against somebody who is
we lost him
all
again.
Of our lists, the best in the world, CM Punk.
God.
Well, and I also do want to give out
best
apologies.
In the world against the best of the rest. CM Punk versus Muda.
Get off there, buddy. I think Marty accidentally, and we all make mistakes. I did in some of my podcast, matchups earlier as well. But I believe it was a mistake. Marty accidentally left Ron Simmons off this list.
Oh.
But hopefully in a pro wrestling podcast down the line, Ron Simmons will be part of the tournament.
Him and CM Punk.
Nice. Well, thank you guys for listening. We appreciate it, and we'll be back next Sunday with a brand new episode of the Tournament Podcast.